as we all know, there's never enough tools around the house. So the other day I was working on down in the workshop and had an old mallet that didn't look presentable anymore, and it was too soft for my intended purpose. And I figured I'd make a new one, and this is what I came up with. And then took another piece of wood, made another mallet, and lastly, I made this one. So, before I go to the story of the latest one, let me tell you about these two. These two are, well, actually, all three of them are made from the same wood, at least the heads are. The heads are made of apple wood that I chopped down, what was it, 7, 8, maybe 9 years ago, down here in the backyard. And I took the liberty of saving some crotches from the between the branches. Sometimes it was multiple branches, sometimes just weird wooden stuff growing there. And I was right when I suspected that this might be some really awesome wood for things like these. You see, in the crotch area, lots of forces are working with each other and against each other, and are making some really dense, some really hard wood. So this is a mallet that is going to be given away as a gift, but is a really beautiful pattern for some detail work, for chiseling. Then this one is a bit more general purpose, still can be used for detail work, but also with a little bit more oomph for some bigger stuff, you know, a good persuasion device. Now this is a little bit in between, I guess. The head is about the same size as the small one, but the handle is of the same wood as this one, both of which are made of cypress. Again, I chopped this one myself as well a few years ago, maybe I don't know, 2, 3, 4 years ago, at my grandparents' house, and it's a lovely wood for a handle, it seems, because it feels soft, but it's not soft. It's much harder, probably because it's denser than pine wood, but it feels like pine wood. It feels soft in the hand, and yet still grippy enough to be great as a handle. And yeah, so let me take you to the story of how this mallet was built. I would like to apologize because I lost some audio on one of the cameras. But anyways, so here I am modifying the shape of cypress wood, so I won't have to deal with the center section, thus risking splits and cracks in the long run. And you can see that I'm marking it off the original center so as to use it later on in the lathe. And here I am modifying the shape of the well, trimming it down, that crotch that I mentioned earlier, that will become the head of the new mallet. This lathe is one of my new additions. I got it earlier this year, and it's a lovely piece of kit, though I still need to learn some of the things with it. The previous one that I had was a small, cheap one. This one wasn't as cheap, though still of a budget variant. Here I'm checking for the roundness so that I don't get too much off-center wobbliness. And don't worry, I did put it on the low speed for the start, because I wouldn't want this piece flying into my head. course taking off material. And as you can see, there are some cracks in between that I will have to fill in, and here I'm doing so with epoxy that I added black dye into. And though it probably increased some curing time, I think the result is worthwhile. And it was a good test. I didn't know if it was going to turn out as well as it did. Here I'm fixing what will become a head to the lathe, because I didn't use it. I used it for some other project in the previous days. And yeah, don't worry, I'll remember to put the paper underneath so that if it drips, that it won't drip onto the lathe. And also adding some masking tape so that it holds the epoxy a little bit better. Here another day or so later, 24 hours-ish as far as epoxy curing time goes. And I'm just using my hand to tap it into place, and removing some excess material again. I'm topping every now and then to check for if I took down all the high spots, going down and down and down. I should have used more epoxy, but yeah. Using some of my handmade chisel, well, gouge I guess, for scraping it down a little bit more, shaping it. This cone I'm making for turning it around to shape the bottom as well, because this is the top part. And the bottom part. I guess in retrospect I could have just removed the entirety of it, but I didn't. Here I'm adding CA glue to some parts, filling in some gaps and reinforcing some of the softer parts, because there were some holes and some spots that I filled in with the sawdust. And here you can see I took the liberty of making this space a little bit nicer, and adding some future proofing for the air, added air, and made a small cabinet. Again, just trimming it down a little bit more, shaving down the mallet for the final preparation, and sanding it down, starting with 180, continuing it with 355, and then finally with some shavings from the planing. And to finish off, I'm adding just wiping on some tung oil. I think especially for these kinds of larger pieces, it's better to apply the oil, at least initially, when it's not turning, and then just buffing it in and buffing it and making it shiny whilst turning. And already you can see how the colors pop really nicely, and yeah, I can already see that this is gonna be a beautiful palette. Here I'll be shaping down the remainder of the bottom. If I had not taken as much material out as I did, it would have been easier to finish the top, but then again, you'll see. I figured it out. Shaping a cone inside to make a little bit of a divot for making positive contact with
bit for making a hole. Sorry for bad angles. Yeah, I was making a hole. And yeah, here's 19 millimeters worth of a hole. Now cutting the top. Trying to make it as square as possible so that you can stand it on its head when you're not using it. Getting as close as possible without getting too much of a wibbly wobbly action into it, because that would just be dangerous if nothing else. And then finally sawing it off with Japanese saw. And of course, so I don't have to sand everything off, to come as close as possible with exactly the same Japanese saw. Trim it down. I love this saw, I really do. And finally, wrapping it up on the sander. I think it's about 100 grit or 80 grit on the top, and I think 300 on the bottom one, which I basically used for polishing it up. It's nice and smooth. Not as shiny as the other pieces, but good enough. Here, again, sorry for the bad angle, but I applied the little bit of tung oil for the other parts as well. And now on to shaping the handle. Drilled a hole to get into the head. And of course, starting with the tenon. And then roughing in the entirety of the shape. I just did it by feel, because I've made enough handles as it is to know roughly how a handle should be like for this, at least in my humble opinion. And then sanding it down whilst turning with some sandpaper. I think again starting with 80, then going with 180 and finishing with the 350 or 355. And then just before adding tung oil, I would also go with some plain shavings. Here we go, the shavings. They just make the surface really nice and buffed out, and this is how they used to do it before they had sandpaper. And a few coats of tung oil again. Since it's natural, I don't need any gloves or anything. Lovely thing. And then again, just using my favorite Japanese saw to remove the handle from the piece and finally shape it on the sander. Break in the edges on the end to make it slide into the hole a little bit easier, and adding some oil on the cap on the end. And sorry for the bad angle, but yeah, it fits in just right. Not too snug, not too loose. And when I'll apply the glue, it will be just right, because wood swells when you add something that is more moisturous, more humid, and yeah, the mallet is as tight as it gets. So, this is the finished mallet. I think it looks absolutely gorgeous. See? Looks absolutely beautiful.
and someone can win this. Down in the doobly-doos you'll find the link to the competition. Fill the entries and let the best win. Bye.